So HBO Max relaunched as Max, and I think they absolutely blew it. They took away some of the best features of HBO Max, features that made it better than Netflix in my opinion. Features like a whole section of just added movies, something I would visit multiple times a week, gone. I'm a little pissed about it if you can't tell, but here in June, they are adding a lot of stuff, and not just a lot of junk, a lot of really great stuff. And even though they've made things harder to find, I'm going to tell you about the best stuff that they've recently added and are continuing to add through the month of June. Right now, I want to tell you about some of the best movies that HBO just recently added to Max. In the drama category, some of my top picks include 3:10 to Yuma, one of the only really great westerns made this century so far. There have not been many. 3:10 to Yuma is easily one of the best. This was directed by James Mangold, who did Walk the Line, Logan, Ford vs. Ferrari, and the new Indiana Jones movie coming out later this summer. Russell Crowe's particularly good in this, Christian Bale is as good as always, and Ben Foster plays an incredible villain in this one. A much more sinister villain than you typically get from most westerns as well. So if it's been a while since you've seen a good western, definitely check this one out. It's well worth watching even if you've seen it. A couple of throwbacks include Dog Day Afternoon with Al Pacino, a real, true classic of a bank heist movie. This is based on true events, and the way it was shot actually feels almost a little bit like a documentary, a little bit. If you like classic movies, this is easily one of the top picks of the month, but if you're maybe one of my younger viewers and haven't really gotten into the movies of the 70s, Dog Day Afternoon is a fantastic place to start. That also goes for my next pick, one of the most classic movies from the 70s, Enter the Dragon. Easily the biggest, most well-known movie Bruce Lee ever starred in. He actually only starred in a handful of movies before he died, Enter the Dragon easily being the best and one of the few that really holds up today. If you like gangster movies, I highly recommend Eastern Promises, starring Viggo Mortensen. This is actually directed by David Cronenberg, who's more famous for sort of body horror movies. This is far from one. When it wants to be graphic, it definitely is, but this is a pretty straightforward gangster flick, and not just regular gangsters, we're talking about Russian gangsters in this one. Viggo Mortensen is amazing in this movie, and the rest of the cast is pretty fantastic as well. You've got Naomi Watts, Vincent Cassel, and the storytelling here is just top-notch. Another one, even though it's got some years on it, it definitely holds up and is well worth checking out in June. And then a longtime favorite of mine is Narc. This is actually from a first-time director, Joe Carnahan, who would go on to do really great action movies like Smokin' Aces and The A-Team. But Narc is an incredibly dark, grungy cop movie. It actually has a fair amount in common with Eastern Promises, making those two a killer double feature, but Ray Liotta has an amazing role in this. This was in no way a big comeback for him, but it was a real standout performance from him in kind of the middle of his career. I mean, it's a small, low-budget cop movie that packs an incredible punch. For some big budget blockbusters, they just recently added Shazam! Fury of the Gods, another entry in the DC universe, one that's better than most in the DC universe lately, but it's largely because they really are trying to make it look and feel like a Marvel movie. The Shazam movies are also funnier than most of the DC movies, making them a lot more accessible in my opinion, but for another big blockbuster, they just added Godzilla, King of the Monsters. This, in my opinion, is one of the better movies released in the Godzilla series. Not the entire series, but the new current one that's been releasing in theaters. This one's the biggest, the most epic, has the most monsters, and is honestly kind of the best in terms of storytelling, and is just more well-rounded than I think any of the other entries. Even though I'm partial to Skull Island, I think that movie is particularly enjoyable. This one just feels the most like an updated Godzilla movie.
You're gonna give me the keys to your car and some money for gas, or you're gonna wake up in the hospital. Trust me, I know how these things play out.
Oh, because you're from the future?
No, because of these.
And then I think X-Men: The Days of Future Past is the last truly good X-Men movie. There's been some spin-offs and things I've not been a fan of. I'm not counting the Wolverine things because they really do stand out on their own, but Days of Future Past is a cool flick. It makes good use of a lot of the characters. It's got some particularly killer action sequences in it, some pretty high stakes, and has all sorts of interesting historical elements, and I think rounds out the X-Men First Class trilogy pretty damn well. If you're into horror, they've got some great stuff, including the entire Evil Dead series, not just the original 3 movies, even though those are the best. They've also got the 2013 remake, which is incredibly dark and twisted. I mean, the first movies are dark and twisted, but they're also kind of funny, and the visual effects are all really interesting to watch. The new one is so dark and twisted, it's really upsetting and not for everyone, but I did appreciate that they went with a completely different tone, one that's maybe a little bit more obvious for this story, but it worked for me and is kind of a nice addition to the series without feeling like it's trying to replicate the success of the original. In fact, with all of those on Max, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the new one that was just out in theaters on Max sometime soon.
You're gonna get you, not another peep. Time to go to sleep.
Your Next is one I particularly enjoyed more recently. Your Next is from 2011. I can't believe this movie's that old already, and I loved this movie back when it originally came out. It's the classic, a bunch of people trapped inside a house while other people are trying to kill them setup. Movies like The Strangers, even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but Your Next has a very interesting twist, and it's nothing too wacky or wild or over the top or supernatural. It makes a little bit of sense and just makes for a very different type of movie, and I absolutely loved Your Next for that. Not sure how rewatchable this movie is, but that first watch is a real doozy. And then for a hidden gem horror movie that I have not seen on Max ever, they just recently added The Black Coat's Daughter. Now this is a slow burn. It's about a couple of girls who get left at school during winter break, and they begin encountering sort of this evil force. Now, The Black Coat's Daughter does a great job of establishing this incredibly creepy mood. The entire movie feels very dark and brooding. There's always a sense that something's about to happen, and The Black Coat's Daughter ultimately delivers. It's best to keep in mind this is a lower budget horror movie, but if that's your jam, I promise you The Black Coat's Daughter delivers. Now, this is Flick Connection. We're only really talking about movies here for the most part, but it's worth noting that with the launch of Max, they didn't just change the name. They really did add a lot of content, but it's mostly things from the Learning Channel, the Food Network, Travel Channel, HGTV, and Discovery. Those networks do have some really great shows, and they might have some shows you were already watching on cable, giving you yet another reason to cut the cable cord. But this is Flick Connection, so let's move on to the movies. In terms of new releases, they more recently added Magic Mike's Last Dance, which admittedly does not have good reviews. I mean, the original Magic Mike just got added to Netflix, and I recommend that movie. It's a solid flick directed by Steven Soderbergh. So is The Last Dance, but it was originally going to be a Max original movie, and they decided to shift it to theaters. It's got Salma Hayek in it, but my goodness, it's probably not going to be a real winner unless you're just a big Magic Mike fan, which I'm not. So let's move on with the rest of the month. They've also recently added a show called The Idol, which they're definitely pushing pretty hard. This has got some of the same creators as Euphoria. It actually stars Johnny Depp's daughter, Lily Rose Depp, and The Weeknd as kind of the two leads of the show. And it looks like a really glossy production. She's this big famous pop star. If you're into any of that, The Idol looks like a pretty solid series. Again, it just dropped on Max. And speaking of things that just dropped, they just added Avatar: The Way of Water. I'll be real honest about Avatar. It's not my favorite thing. I don't really love the concept. If these movies were done the same way Marvel movies were produced, I really don't think I would even care to watch them. However, in the hands of James Cameron, both the original and this new one feel insanely real. I mean, yes, there are plenty of moments throughout the movie where it looks animated and it feels like you're watching an adult cartoon, but there are also a lot of moments that look shockingly realistic, and that's because this movie is packed with cutting-edge technology that uses real footage and CGI in ways that you just haven't seen before, and it really does play tricks with your eyes in kind of an amazing way, and the storytelling here is really fantastic. The movie's incredibly long-winded, but when you've got it packed with so many amazing visuals, you really don't mind. The last 90 minutes almost, maybe 80, are absolutely action-packed with almost no pauses in the action. It's wild, over-the-top James Cameron stuff, and I really did love this movie. I can't wait to see the others. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. It's not quite a new release, but they just added A Star is Born back to Max, and they have the original A Star is Born movies. For the record, that's the 1954 version, the 1976 version, and the more recent 2018 version. Another movie I highly recommend. Another example of a genre I don't particularly love, but my goodness did Bradley Cooper direct the hell out of that 2018 version.
I don't have a vagina.
I'm just saying that even if you did, it wouldn't be okay for Kevin to tease you about your vagina.
No, why are you making it sound like I have a vagina?
I know you don't have a vagina. I'm not doing that.
All right, coming up later in the month, on the 13th, they're adding Vacation, which is sort of the reboot of the Vacation series, which again does not look like a movie I would have cared to watch. I love the original Vacation. I think Christmas Vacation is probably one of the funniest movies ever made, certainly the best Christmas movie ever made. So I'm a fan of the original flicks, but this new one is insanely funny. Ed Helms plays Rusty, who's all grown up and has his own family. Christina Applegate does a great job as the wife and mother. You've got some incredible comedy actors as the young kids, and the jokes are really funny. I mean, if you go into it with a cynical attitude, I could see where you're not gonna be able to enjoy it, but if you go into it just wanting to laugh and have fun, the movie is packed with laughs. And it's actually directed by John Francis Daley, who some of you might recognize as the kid on Freaks and Geeks. He directed this, he directed Game Night, which is a movie I think is insanely funny, and the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I also think was really funny, even if you've never played the game. It is currently hanging out over on Paramount Plus, though, included for free, but it may be worth a rental. I just thought I'd mention it here because I really did like that movie, and I love what he does as a comedy director. Whew, that was a long-winded review of Vacation, but Skylar Gisondo, who plays the older son in that movie, is insanely funny in that movie. He's also hysterical in The Righteous Gemstones, which comes back to HBO on June 18th. I say HBO, it'll be available if you still have HBO. It'll be available on Max. It's led off by Danny McBride, but has just an all-star cast. I think the show is insanely hilarious. If you haven't picked it up yet, try season 1. If you're not into it by the first 2 or 3 episodes, maybe it's not for you. Personally, I can't wait for season 3 to start. I think it's one of the funniest shows on TV right now. But if that's not for you, they are bringing back Sex and the City. And no, not just the movies, even though yes, they did add those as well, but And Just Like That is the clumsy new title of the new Sex and the City show. It's going to be all about the women in their 50s and looks like something I definitely won't be watching, but fans of the show, obviously that's going to be a must-watch for you. They're also bringing back Warrior for season 3. I know this show was a hit when they added it to HBO Max originally, and it's cool that season 3 is going to be coming to Max soon. If you haven't seen that one yet, and you like martial arts movies of any kind, definitely catch up on the previous 2 seasons. They're currently available on Max as well. They've also added a ton of titles in 4K with the release of Max. Here are those titles now. Pause the screen if you need more time, but Max did add a lot of value. There's a lot more content. Most of it is reality-based, like Food Network and HGTV, but they've got these 4K titles right here, and they've added a lot more. I just wish they didn't take away some of the browsing features. Who knows, maybe we'll get those back if we complain enough. Or hell, maybe if the video gets enough views, which is a good time to mention, like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that stuff. It really does help elevate the video and the channel so I can keep making these videos. I will keep making these episodes as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Max episode. Gotta get used to saying Max and not HBO Max, but you will see me on the next one.